Good morning, and thanks very much for joining us. Always a pleasure to have a chance to sit down and catch up with the mayor of the capital city of our state, Boston Mayor Marty Walsh. Hey, Mayor.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, John.
Good to have you, as always. Appreciate it. So in your State of the City speech last month, Mayor, you called on the state legislature, where you served for a number of years before you became mayor, to give the city more leeway with home rule to manage development, raise funds for transportation. It's been a little while now. What's the response been?
Well, we're still working through the process. We just sent up the transfer tax bill about a week before my State of the City, so it's working through the legislative process. A lot of it's moving forward up there. I'm not sure what the ultimate outcome will be, but what we're asking is, you know, we run a very strong, responsible city, and every time that we want to go raise revenue or something like that, we have to basically ask the legislature for forgiveness or approval, and I think that some of that should change.
Why has the legislature been so reluctant to approve home rule over the years?
I mean, it's been probably 80 years in the making. You know, at one point, the city of Boston mayor had a lot more authority to do things, and over time, the governors and the legislature back in the 30s and 40s took a lot of power away from cities and towns, including the city of Boston.
Yeah, the idea was that these grubby, corrupt ethnics couldn't manage the city, right?
Curley, the Irishman, and a lot of that has been slowly but surely piecemeal, kind of getting some of that authority back. And you know, I just feel like when I work with my colleagues around the country, whether it's Chicago or New York or LA, they have the ability to be able to raise revenue. They have the ability to be able to make decisions that don't have to get approval for. And we're looking for some of that. And what I talked about at the State of the City, the transfer tax is one of those.
So when you were in the legislature, what would you hear from your colleagues about home rule? I mean, we're no longer in the Curley era. What gives?
Boston didn't make a big push back then. Quite honestly, what they really focused on was liquor licenses and getting increased liquor licenses.
We're talking about the 90s into the
late 90s into the 2000s, into the 2000s, and I was there till 2013.
Right.
So the city didn't really push a lot of this stuff. There wasn't really a big push to raise revenue for building housing at the state. There wasn't a big push to get a lot of home rules passed through the legislature. Part of that was because there was a federal partner that made investments in housing and transportation. Part of that was maybe that's just a fight that Mayor Menino and maybe even before him, Flynn and White didn't want.
And isn't it true that you get out in the suburbs, central and western Massachusetts, legislators from there have a kind of a chip on their shoulder about the city and funding and other issues being Boston-centric, don't they?
In some ways, yes. And I have a very good relationship with most of my colleagues, my former colleagues at the State House. And I think that, you know, the approach I've taken as mayor that's been changed since the past is a regional approach. And I want to see other cities and towns in the Commonwealth be successful, because that helps the entire state, and I think it's important that we work collaboratively together rather than in silos and against each other.
Before we take our break, this past week the Boston School Department released their budget for the coming fiscal year, and there's $36 million in new funding for the schools for, among other things, school-based family liaisons and social workers and more professional development for teachers. So there's been a lot of talk over the years, Mayor, about schools more and more becoming de facto parents to deal with very real issues raised by broken and struggling home situations. Is that what this is about?
It is, and we could spend an hour talking about this, but we'll try and do this in a couple of seconds here. We have the kids a lot of times from 7 in the morning till 3 in the afternoon. We don't have them the majority of the day from 3 in the afternoon until 7 in the morning. A lot of these kids have challenges. A lot of what we're doing, we can instruct kids in the classroom, but it really does come down to the family unit and helping families move along. A lot of this money that we're putting in here is to provide some wraparound services to work with families. You have families dealing with a lot of issues outside of the educational system. So our kids go home to situations that, whether it's poverty or mental health or substance abuse, or whatever it might be, we have to do more of it. If we want to improve the school districts, we have to make more investments there.
How about extending the school day?
We did.
I know. How about more?
We can do that. It's not just that, though. It's also how do we help the families move through some of the challenges they might have.